Antony and Cleopatra, Relational Addiction. Throughout Shakespeare's love tragedy, Antony and Cleopatra, numerous instances suggest that Antony and Cleopatra's relationship is mimetic of addiction. Antony being the user and Cleopatra the substance. With fatal and tragic consequences, Antony cannot help but indulge himself in the intoxicating sensuality and euphoria that is his relationship with Cleopatra, even though this relationship and its consequences discredits his hard-won Roman virtue. Like addictive substances, if we personify their traits, Cleopatra is jealous and insecure about Antony leaving her side and forgetting her. Addictive substances create withdrawal symptoms that punish the user for leaving, and Cleopatra does much of the same to Antony in terms of punishment, as well as not being able to give her up. Much like an overdose, when the addict returns to the substance, it is more than they can tolerate, and this leads to a tragic, premature end. Reading the play through this metaphor of addiction opens new avenues with which to understand this centuries-old popular relationship between two strong and fascinating figures. Comparing symptoms of drug addiction as listed by the Mayo Clinic, Antony exhibits the following: feeling that you have to use the drug regularly, daily, or even several times a day, having intense urges for the drug that block out any other thoughts, not meeting obligations and work responsibilities because of drug use, continuing to use the drug even though you know it's causing problems in your life or causing you physical or psychological harm, failing in your attempts to stop using the drug, experiencing withdrawal symptoms when you attempt to stop taking the drug. Antony exhibits these characteristics. Antony had a reputation of being an extraordinarily successful Roman soldier and conqueror, until Cleopatra, that is. He is criticized by Philo in the first lines of the play for letting his love dictate his decisions and totally undermining his Roman virtues. This dotage of our generals o'erflows the measure. This description is oddly similar to Paul Rexton Cahn's fascinating report of drug use among combatants, wherein he notes that, regardless of the type of drugs and reasons for use, widespread drug intoxication among forces has meant that many fighters do not act in a predictable manner. Antony is not acting predictably as a general any longer. Enobarbus, his closest friend and ally, even recognizes, "I see still a diminution in our captain's brain. It is even starting to be regarded in Rome that Antony has given away all his military command to Cleopatra's eunuchs and her maids." Why would Antony overturn all the Roman virtues and reputation he has gained through his career? The answer is that he simply cannot help himself when it comes to his own substance abuse. Cleopatra. The allure of Cleopatra, much like a substance, robs Antony of his self-control and logic. Ronald Akers illustrates why many drug users will continue their addiction, much in the same way as Antony and Cleopatra. There appear to be an important problem in successfully extinguishing addiction in humans, and it is this problem which operates as a condition of addiction relapse. Immediate effects of drug intake may be defined as pleasant or euphoric. The aversive stimulation of withdrawal does not occur until much later. This same effect seems to be happening throughout the play with Antony. While Antony is in the throes of Cleopatra, he does not have to face the consequences of his poor decisions, nor the negative impact of his withdrawals from her. As elucidated in the play, his captain's heart, which in the scuffles of great fights hath burst the buckles on his breast, reneges all temper and is become the bellows and the fan to cool a gypsy's lust. While Antony is under Cleopatra's euphoric influence, he is an impaired general and makes poor military decisions and loses trust and command among his own ranks. Due to broken responsibilities and tumults in Antony's home country because of his negligence, he makes the decision to leave Egypt and return to Rome, but it is with an underlying desperation. "I must with haste from hence." This realization mirrors the agony and desperation when a user realizes the harm their substance abuse has caused to their responsibilities, relations, and life. As Ronald Akers mentions in his study on addiction, it is vitally important that an addict, like Antony, change their environment or risk relapse. Unfortunately for Antony, his reformation when he returned home was merely temporary, as he could not refrain from rebounding back to Egypt to the arms of Cleopatra. I will to Egypt, in the east my pleasure lies. Diving back into his environment of addiction, Antony was bound to relapse. Antony resembles a drug user who is seeking rehabilitation when he first returns to Rome from Egypt. He believes he has come to himself again and makes resolutions to return to his important Roman duties and apologizes to Caesar for his negligence. Poisoned hours had bound me up from mine own knowledge. As nearly as I may, I'll play the penitent to you. To prove his earnestness, he makes an alliance with Caesar by marrying his sister Octavia. It is not clear whether Antony intended from the start to give full fidelity to Octavia. It has been interpreted differently by many, but Enobarbus knows of a certainty his friend and commander will not be faithful to this oath, this rehabilitation. When Maecenas mentions that Antony would now leave Cleopatra as he is married to Octavia, Enobarbus with surety responds, "Never, he will not." In fact, Enobarbus's further statements are frighteningly eerie if readers consider them in the context of a drug instead of Cleopatra herself. Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety. Other women cloy the appetites they feed, but she makes hungry where most she satisfies. And so Enobarbus's perspective rings true, and Antony returns to Cleopatra. Like a drug, Cleopatra's allure and euphoric sensualities draw Antony back. Much like a relapse after a period of sobriety, this has a catastrophic overdose effect that instigates tremendous negative consequences. This completely shatters his alliance with Caesar at home, breaks Octavia's heart, and provokes a war. On top of this, Cleopatra clouds Antony's sensible judgments. Enobarbus tells Cleopatra to her face, "Your presence needs must puzzle Antony. Take from his heart, take from his brain, from time what should not then be spared." True to form, and unfortunately, together Cleopatra and Antony make horrendous battle decisions to attack Caesar from the sea, which cost more than his soldiers' lives, but trust in Antony's leadership. Just like a drug, in the climax of heated battle, Cleopatra abandons Antony when he most needed it. She retreats, and Antony follows her. She howls and begs for his forgiveness, saying she never anticipated Antony would follow her retreat. In a fit of rage and passion he wails, "Egypt, thou knewest too well my heart was to thy rudder tied by the strings, and thou shouldst tow me after, or my spirit thy full supremacy thou knewest, and that thy beck might from thy bidding of the gods command me." David Shalwick communicates very succinctly this important piece of the puzzle in his article. The repetition, "thou knewest," is an almost rueful declaration of what he has in fact discovered about himself, that she matters more than even the bidding of the gods. What a sad realization Antony has. You knew I would follow, and you deserted me anyway. Cleopatra's cowardice and priority for self-preservation was not burdened with the concern that Antony would follow her and Caesar would win the war. This self-centeredness is also evident even as Antony dies. Cleopatra cries out, "Hast thou no care of me?" She manages even to make Antony's death about herself. Addiction and substances alike do not care about the fate of their user, nor the consequences to the user's life. Additionally, other behaviors of Cleopatra in the play seem to mirror addictive substances. Cleopatra is extremely jealous and insecure, which mimics the side effects a substance gives when neglected. The evidence of these insecurities is heavy within the play. When Fulvia dies, Cleopatra wonders if Antony will react with the same stoicism of her own death. O most false love, with sorrowful water, now I see in Fulvia's death how mine received shall be. When Antony eventually leaves, she is terrified that he will forget her and speaks clumsily. Sir, you and I must part, but that's not it. Sir, you and I have loved, but there's not it, that you knew well. Something it is I would. Oh, my oblivion is a very Antony, and I am all forgotten. Narcissistically she cries, I'll seem the fool I am not. Antony will be himself. Addictive forming substances react with comparable, though chemically created jealousy, as they provide euphoria, pain relief, or relaxation while being consumed. When not used, however, drugs retaliate with harsh withdrawal symptoms that will not allow the user to function, a form of jealousy within the addiction. A final reflection of their relationship, mimetic of substance abuse, is that addiction cannot survive long without the user. Antony dies, and while Cleopatra's servant Iris looks upon her master, she expresses, she's dead too, our sovereign. And truly, Cleopatra dies soon after Antony, the chilling reminder that when addiction claims a life, they take the user as their own. She shall be buried by her Antony, indicating that she has claimed him as her own, much as a substance will mercilessly claim the whole of its dependent. Antony and Cleopatra is a play capable of many interpretations, and one of these is a fascinating and unique metaphor for understanding hard addictive substances and the toll they take on the user. Antony, as the user, suffers a shattered reputation, unreliable judgment, demolished identity, crumbled responsibilities, and relationships. Cleopatra, as the enslaving substance, suffers distinct narcissistic jealousies, punishes egregiously, only cares for self, and cannot survive without the user. Cleopatra's influence on Antony, though intoxicatingly euphoric, was his ultimate downfall, and in the end, she claimed his life as her own.